In part 10, we are riveting the hinge and finally finishing the locket. Pull down the pin just enough to clear one side and start cleaning your locket around that area. So again, keeping it shut completely and together, file away all of that extra little bit of wall we've left or anything that's been exposed during soldering. You want to solder really nice and flat and change side, push the pin down, do the other side. Very straight and nice and perfect. I'm using a number 2 file, hand file. You are trying to blend all of your file strokes together. On your top, do your cleaning with the sandpaper sticks and as well as all over the sides. You can do coarse and then medium. Eventually we'll do fine as well. Be very careful around the hinge not to file down the hinge itself or emery down the hinge itself. It's very thin. So one of the ways is using a rubber wheel. We must shape up our rubber wheel first using a truing stone. And this way you can shape your rubber wheel to match exactly the contour of what you're doing, in our case flat. So I shaped it on an angle. We don't want a rounded rubber wheel to leave marks on our project. So adjust your pin and take your rubber wheel and pass all around there. You must keep moving at all times using a rubber wheel or you will create waves and divots in there. So use lightly and keep moving. Also beware if your solder line is not perfect, it will show up, it will open up those pits. So use only when necessary and carefully. And reshape as needed on your truing stone. We need to create a little groove now for your nail to fit in to open this locket. Using your saw, you will pass right at the opening where the two sides meet. You will pass a few times very, very straight, creating a small groove on the side against the hinge. Then switch to a triangular needle file and do gentle passes. We don't want a wide opening. We just want a very small and narrow opening to fit your nails in. And that's it. If you need to touch up while it's open so your angle is very, very tight and not wide, you can do so. Be very careful to have something very clean there. If your locket is too loose and doesn't snap shut and doesn't click in position, you can take your half round pliers and use them to manipulate that inner bezel we put there. So you can take it and pull up until it clicks in. Very, very little should be needed for this, just to bring it up a little bit so it catches and snaps. And now for our rivet, remove your temporary pin. Take a ball burr a little bit smaller than your tube. So most of you has a tube of 1.8 millimeters, so you can take a ball burr that is 1.5, 1.6 millimeters and create a small divot on both sides. Take a new pin, a new sterling silver pin that fits very snugly and that is very straight as well. Not an old piece of wire, a brand new piece of wire that's straight. Insert it in and file one side perfectly flat. You can use a hand file or a needle file, being careful not to damage the actual locket. You then pull down your pin until it sticks out about a millimeter or just under, so no more than a millimeter for this rivet. You will then cut the other side also at a millimeter or just under, again being careful not to hit your locket. And you will now file this end perfectly flat as well. It's important for the riveting action to work well to have, first of all, the divot, and second, that the rivet is the wire is very flat before hammering. Make sure that your wire is evenly spaced at each end, a millimeter on each end. Using a steel block or a steel anvil, position your locket so that the pin, and only the pin, rests on the steel block. If you push down, the pin will insert and you will end up riveting only the top and have nothing on the other side at the bottom. So you have to ensure that your pin is what is touching your steel block during the riveting action if you want a successful rivet. You may tape your locket away from the rivet just in case you hit it with the hammer by mistake. The tape will help you a little bit. Take your riveting hammer and start to hammer your pin a little bit on each side and switch, and a little bit more on the other side, and switch often to mushroom that little extra wire sticking out. If the wire moves up and down, recenter it before continuing. You can use a smaller riveting hammer if it helps, but you must mushroom that wire into that divot or into that depression that we created with the bulber. If you used a wire that is too long, it will bend instead of mushrooming. And if you use the pin that is too thin, it will bend within the hinge and be curved instead of mushrooming at the end. You can take your barrette needle file and clean the mushroom you've just created. You can file completely flush because it is filled in that depression we created. And then you can clean up with your rubber wheel. The next step is to clean on the inside of your locket. You really have a lot of options here. It's up to you. I really like the look of the fiberglass pen. It gives a nice, simple, clean finish. But you could also blacken if you want, or do other textures in there without damaging the side wall, of course. To clean, the last part is our little inner bezel. We can use a needle file and wrap some fine sandpaper around to have a nice small sanding stick, and just simply clean our little bezel very gently. We still want the locket to close and hopefully snap shut, so you need to do only a little bit on there just to clean it up. And that's it. Just do a nice clean finish. You can polish if you want or leave a matte finish as long as it's perfect.